His eyes widened when he saw the shadowy figure. He cursed under his breath, pulling the curtain closed quickly. He turned to her, his voice sharp but trembling. "We can't tell anyone, not yet. If we do, they'll know it was you who gave him food and the police will blame us." She felt tears sting her eyes. "But what if he needs help?" she whispered. "What if he's not bad like they say?" Her brother shook his head fiercely. "Doesn't matter, it's too dangerous." The two of them sat together in silence, listening to the ticking clock and the pounding of their own hearts. Eventually, her brother fell back asleep, but she could not. She crept to the window again near dawn. The man was still there, sitting now on the curb, his head in his hands, as if the weight of the world crushed his shoulders. The sight made her chest ache with a strange mixture of fear and pity. She wanted to open the door, to give him water, to speak to him. But the memory of the police, the stern look in their eyes, and her father's warning echoed in her mind. She forced herself to close the curtain and step away. The morning came, and with it, tension thick in the air. Neighbors gathered again, whispering, pointing, claiming they had seen him wandering the street. One man said he had tried to open a gate. Another swore he had seen him near the park. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said he was harmless. Others insisted he was dangerous and must be caught before something terrible happened. The girl's parents exchanged worried looks. Her father muttered that it was only a matter of time before the police came back. The girl sat quietly, her fingers twisting in her lap, the secret inside her screaming louder than ever. That night, just when she thought things might calm, the footsteps returned, this time closer, heavier. Her heart leapt into her throat as she heard them outside her very own house. The sound of someone moving slowly past the windows, the soft crunch of gravel under his shoes. She grabbed her blanket and curled into a ball, praying he would go away. But then came the sound that made her blood run cold, the faint tap of fingers brushing against the front door. Not a knock, not loud, just a soft touch, as though he was testing if someone was awake. She held her breath, her entire body trembling. Her eyes wide in the darkness, she waited for the door to creak open, for the man to step inside, but after a long moment of silence, the sound of footsteps drifted away again, fading into the night. She let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She lay awake until morning, her eyes burning, her mind racing. She didn't know if the man was searching for help or if he was searching for something else. But she knew the fragile line she had been walking was breaking, and the secret she carried could no longer stay hidden, because soon the truth would not just be standing outside in the shadows, it would come knocking on her very door, and when it did, there would be no place left to hide. The morning sun rose, but the little girl felt no warmth in its light. Her eyes were swollen from a night without sleep, her small body heavy with dread. She sat at the breakfast table pushing her food around without eating. Her parents exchanged uneasy glances. Her father muttered that the police had been seen again in the neighborhood. Her mother whispered that neighbors claimed the man had been spotted wandering behind the old church. Every word felt like a sharp stone pressing deeper into the girl's chest. Her brother kicked her under the table lightly, a silent reminder to stay quiet. But her lips trembled as if the secret wanted to pour out. She lowered her head and remained silent. The day passed slowly, the air outside tense. Neighbors gathered in clusters, their voices rising with fear. Children were pulled indoors, curtains were drawn, everyone waiting for something to happen. The girl sat near her window again, her eyes scanning the street, her small hands gripping the curtain so tightly her knuckles turned white. Each hour felt like a storm, building higher and higher. Then, just as the sun dipped and shadows stretched long across the houses, the sound came, heavy, certain, a knock at the door. Not soft like the man's touch the night before, but loud, hard, echoing through the house like thunder. She froze, her spoon clattering to the floor. Her parents jumped up, her father rushing to the door when it opened. Two police officers stood tall, their faces stern but calmer than before. The officers stepped inside, explaining that the man had been found. He was alive, taken into custody. The girl's breath caught in her throat, her mind spinning. They said he had been wandering the streets for days, avoiding them, but last night he had surrendered. When asked why, one officer paused, his voice softer. He said the man had told them something unusual, something important. He said there was a little girl, the only one who had shown him kindness, who had given him food when everyone else turned away, and that small act had given him the strength to stop running. To face them, the girl's eyes widened. her throat tight. Her secret now uncovered not by her own words, but by his. Her mother gasped. Her father's eyes narrowed with disbelief. Her brother stared at her in shock. The officers looked at her gently, their voices calm. "He wanted us to tell you that your kindness mattered," one said. "He said it reminded him he was still human." The girl felt her cheeks burn, her heart heavy but lighter than before. Her parents exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. Neighbors soon gathered outside, whispering, pointing toward the police car parked down the street. But the girl barely noticed them. Her mind stuck on the man's broken eyes, his trembling hands, his whispered thank you. She realized that her sandwich had not only fed his hunger, but had given him courage. She had feared her act would bring danger, but it had brought surrender instead. That night, as the house settled into silence, she sat by the window once more, the lamp glowing faintly outside, the street calm. No figure waiting in the shadows anymore, yet she knew she would never forget the sight of him standing there, nor the sound of the knocks that shook her home. She pressed her forehead to the glass, whispering softly into the night. "You're welcome," though she knew he could not hear. Her chest rose with a mix of pride and sadness, because even though the danger was gone, the memory would stay. The story of how one small sandwich and one quiet thank you had changed everything. She closed the curtain gently, climbed into bed, and for the first time in days allowed herself to sleep, though she knew that the echo of those knocks would live in her heart forever. When she reached her neighborhood, whispers filled the air like buzzing insects. Neighbors gathered again, their voices more urgent now. Some claimed the police had returned earlier while everyone was at work and school. Others said the man had been spotted near the old abandoned building at the edge of town. Children pointed and giggled nervously. Adults shook their heads. The girl lowered her gaze, terrified someone might look at her and know her secret. She quickened her pace until she was safely inside her house, closing the door behind her like she was shutting the world out. But the world still pressed against the walls. That evening, as her family gathered for dinner, her father sighed heavily and said the police would likely return soon. He said the man might be more dangerous than people thought. Her mother asked what he meant, but he only shook his head, muttering that sometimes people on the run were capable of anything. The girl gripped her spoon tightly, her mind filling with panic. She remembered the man's tired eyes, the way he had whispered, "Thank you." It was impossible to believe he could hurt anyone. And yet, why else would the police be after him? She lowered her head, her food untouched, and her brother kicked her gently under the table, a reminder to stay quiet. The kick hurt less than the guilt in her chest. Later that night, she crept into her room and shut the door softly. She could no longer keep the secret pressed so tightly inside. Her thoughts spun until her head ached. She wanted to confess to someone, but her brother's warning echoed in her ears. "They'll blame you," he had said. She sat on her bed, hugging her knees, her eyes wet with tears. Finally, she whispered the truth into the darkness, as if the shadows were her only safe listener. "I gave him the sandwich," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I helped him." And for a moment she felt relief, until a sound outside froze her heart. She tiptoed to the window and peeked through the curtain, her breath catching in her throat across the street. Near the same lamp where he had been before stood the man again, his body thin, his shoulders slumped, his face half hidden by shadow. But his eyes seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and they were fixed on her house. On her window, her knees grew weak. She stumbled back, pressing a hand over her mouth to keep from gasping too loud. She ran to her bed and pulled the blanket up, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might shake the whole house awake. She lay there trembling, listening to the silence outside, every creak of the house louder, every tick of the clock sharper. She did not know if he meant harm, or if he was simply lost and searching for kindness again. But she knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just about a sandwich. It was about secrets, fear, and the truth waiting to come crashing into her life. She closed her eyes tight, praying he would be gone by morning, not realizing that the true knock she feared was already making its way back to her door, and when it came, it would not be gentle. The following morning, the little girl woke with her heart still racing. Her sleep had been broken, filled with dreams of footsteps outside her window and shadows pressing against her door. She rubbed her tired eyes and slowly sat up. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that made her ears ring. Downstairs, she could hear her parents speaking in sharp whispers, their voices tense. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the stairs. Listening carefully, her father was saying the police had returned late at night, going door to door, asking more questions about the man. Her mother said she had heard from a neighbor that the man wasn't just homeless. He had been missing for weeks, wanted for questioning in connection to something serious. The girl's heart clenched tightly. Her father lowered his voice, saying some believed he had been involved in a crime, maybe even something violent. The little girl's breath caught. She held onto the railing to steady herself, her stomach twisting. She thought of the trembling man holding her sandwich, whispering "thank you" with broken eyes. Could that really be the same man they were describing? All day at school, she felt distant. Her classmates laughing, shouting, playing, while her mind replayed the whispers of her parents. She sat at her desk, doodling little sandwiches and eyes in the margins of her notebook. Her teacher scolded her for not paying attention, but she barely heard it. The question throbbed inside her. Had she helped a criminal? Or had she simply helped a hungry man by the time she walked home? She felt as if she carried the heaviest secret in the world. When she turned the corner to her street, her stomach dropped. The police car was parked outside her neighbor's house. Lights off, but presence heavy, 2 officers stood talking to neighbors. Writing in their notebooks, she froze for a moment, then quickly hurried inside, her cheeks flushed, her hands trembling. That evening, her parents sat around the table looking more serious than ever. Her brother sat across from her, his eyes darting nervously. Her father said the police had confirmed the man was connected to a case, that he wasn't just some poor wanderer. Her mother whispered that he might have been dangerous all along. The girl bit her lip until it hurt. The guilt building so high she felt she would burst finally, unable to hold it inside. She grabbed her brother's sleeve after dinner and pulled him into her room. Her eyes wide and wet with tears, she confessed again, this time with her voice trembling. "I gave him my sandwich. I was the one who helped him." Her brother's eyes widened with horror, his voice rising in panic as he hissed. "Why did you say that again? I told you not to tell anyone. Not even me." She begged him to listen, saying she couldn't stop thinking about it, that she didn't believe the man was evil, that his eyes had been too sad. Her brother shook his head, pacing across the small room. He told her if the police found out, they might think she knew him, that she was part of something. His words made her stomach twist tighter. She sat on the bed shaking. Her brother finally put a hand on her shoulder, whispering sharply that she must keep her mouth shut no matter what. Night fell heavy and dark, and once again she found herself at the window, her small hands parting the curtain just slightly. At first the street looked calm, the lamp humming faintly, the houses quiet. But then she froze, her breath catching. Across the road near the alley, she saw movement, a figure stepping slowly into the light. It was him, the same man, his body thin and weak, his shoulders bent, his face pale. He looked around cautiously, then lifted his head toward her house, his eyes scanning the windows as though searching for something or someone. She stumbled back from the curtain, her heart hammering, her breaths short. She pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from making a sound. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees. Every sound outside growing louder. She could hear dogs barking in the distance, a car passing slowly, the faint hum of the lamp. She thought of the police, of their stern faces and heavy boots. She thought of her parents, of their worried whispers. She thought of the man, of his tired eyes and his soft thank you. And she realized she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than she could understand. She lay in bed that night trembling, her body wrapped tightly in the blanket, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. She did not know if the man had come back for help, or if he had come for another reason entirely. But deep down she knew one thing. The secret she carried was no longer safe, and sooner or later, the truth would knock on her door louder than the police ever could. The night air was heavy, pressing against the little girl's window as though the darkness itself wanted to creep inside. She lay awake, her small body curled under the blanket, her eyes wide as she listened to every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the distant bark of a dog, the faint hum of the street lamp. But then there was another sound, softer and closer, the sound of footsteps, slow and careful. She held her breath, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would break through her chest. She crept toward the window and pulled the curtain back just a sliver, and her heart nearly stopped. There he was, the same man, standing in the shadows across the street, his figure outlined by the dim light. His head tilted slightly upward, his eyes fixed on her house. For a moment she thought he was staring directly at her window, and her knees grew weak. She stumbled back, pressing her back against the wall, her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. Minutes passed like hours. She forced herself to peek again. He had not moved. He stood still as though he was part of the night itself. His clothes ragged, his hands hanging at his sides. His shoulders slumped, but his eyes, even from the distance, seemed alive, searching, pleading. She could not tell if he looked desperate or dangerous. She hugged her blanket tighter, her mind racing. Should she tell her parents? Should she scream? Or should she stay quiet? Her brother stirred in the next room, and she tiptoed over, shaking him awake, whispering urgently, "He's back! He's outside!" Her brother blinked, confused until he followed her to the window. The next morning began with an uneasy silence in the house. The little girl sat at the table staring at her untouched breakfast while her parents spoke softly to each other, their words blending into a low hum she barely noticed. Her mind was filled with the memory of the man under the street lamp, the way he had looked at her, not with anger, but with eyes that seemed to carry a story too heavy to tell. She chewed on her lip and wondered if he was still there. If he had slept outside in the cold again, her heart ached with pity, yet fear pressed against it like a shadow. Suddenly, a loud and heavy knock shook the door. The sound echoed through the small house. Startling everyone, her father looked up sharply. Her mother froze with the cup of tea in her hand. Even her brother stopped mid-bite. The knocking came again, firmer, stronger. Demanding to be answered, her father stood slowly and walked to the door. Opening it with caution, outside stood two police officers in dark uniforms, their faces serious, the morning light reflecting off their badges. The girl's stomach dropped. She clutched her chair as though it might keep her from falling. The officers greeted her father and asked if they had seen a certain man in the neighborhood. One of them held up a picture, and the girl's eyes widened. It was him, the very same man she had given her sandwich to, the very same man who had sat outside under the lamp. She felt her heart leap into her throat. Her mother stepped closer, her voice nervous as she asked why the police were looking for him. One officer explained that he was a missing person connected to a case, someone they needed to find quickly. The girl's palms began to sweat. Her little secret grew heavier than ever. Her mind screamed to speak, to tell them about the sandwich, about how he had looked grateful and broken, but her voice stuck in her throat. Her father shook his head slowly and said they hadn't seen anyone suspicious. Her mother nodded in agreement, and the girl sat frozen. Feeling the lie pass through the doorway, the officers glanced at the house, their eyes scanning as though trying to read the truth in their silence. Finally, they handed her father a card and said if anyone saw him, they must call immediately as they turned to leave. The girl caught the eye of one officer, and for a brief moment, she felt as though he could see the guilt written across her face. She lowered her head quickly, her heart pounding so loudly she thought the whole room could hear it. When the door closed, her parents began whispering in hushed, worried tones, but the girl sat in silence. Knowing her life had just shifted, her small act of kindness had now tied her to something far bigger than she could ever understand, and the fear of what would happen next settled deep into her chest. The day passed with a heavy cloud hanging over the little girl's home. Even though the sun shone outside, inside everything felt darker. Her parents moved around the house, speaking in low voices, their eyes filled with worry. Her father kept looking out the window as though expecting someone to return, while her mother busied herself with chores she didn't usually do, scrubbing the same table over and over as if trying to scrub away her thoughts. The girl sat quietly in her room, her hands gripping the edge of the curtain as she peeked out toward the street. Neighbors had gathered in small groups, their voices hushed but sharp, pointing fingers toward the corner where the man had been seen. She could hear bits of conversation float through the open window. Some called him dangerous, others said he was a thief. One whispered he might be hiding from the law. Each word stung the girl, because she remembered the way he had whispered thank you. His eyes filled not with malice, but with hunger and sadness. She wanted to defend him, to shout at them that he was not a monster, but her lips remained sealed, fear pressing them closed tighter than any lock. Later that afternoon, another knock came. Softer this time, but still enough to make everyone in the house jump. Her mother answered quickly, trying to look calm. It was a neighbor. A tall woman with sharp eyes. She leaned inside, whispering questions about the police visit earlier. Her voice carried a mix of curiosity and accusation. Her mother brushed her off politely, but the woman's eyes narrowed as though she sensed something was being hidden. When the door closed, her mother let out a long sigh. Her shoulders slumping with the weight of worry, the girl stayed silent, her secret now burning heavier than ever inside her chest. That evening, as the family sat down to eat, her father broke the silence, his voice low and serious. He said they must be careful, that the man was still out there somewhere, that the police would be returning. Her brother asked what the man had done, but her father only shook his head, saying the details were unclear. The girl wanted to ask too, but she bit her tongue. Afraid her questions might reveal the truth, she forced herself to chew her food, though every bite tasted bitter, her ears straining to catch every word her parents spoke. Her brother seemed uninterested, quickly moving back to his toys. But the girl felt as if she was carrying a stone inside her heart, heavier with each passing hour that night. The neighborhood seemed restless. People stood on porches longer than usual. Porch lights flickered on early, and dogs barked at shadows. The girl crept to her window again, her small hands parting the curtain just enough to see. The man was no longer sitting under the street lamp. The corner was empty, but the emptiness was no comfort. It only made her wonder where he had gone. Was he hiding nearby? Was he still hungry? Or was he watching from some unseen place? She pulled the curtain closed quickly, goosebumps crawling up her arms behind her. The voices of her parents grew sharper, their whispers turning into worried arguments. Her father insisting they should tell the police if they saw anything. Her mother saying they should stay quiet and out of trouble. The girl sat on her bed listening, her small chest rising and falling with fear. Her secret now too big for her to hold, finally. When the house grew quiet and her parents had gone to bed, she slipped into her brother's room, shaking his shoulder gently until he stirred. She whispered to him about what she had done, how she had given her sandwich to the man, how he had thanked her. Her brother's eyes widened as he sat up, his voice a harsh whisper filled with panic. "Why did you do that? Don't you know what kind of trouble this could bring?" he hissed, the girl's eyes filled with tears. She explained she had only wanted to help, that he looked so hungry and sad. But her brother shook his head, fear flashing in his young face. He told her she must never tell anyone else. Not their parents, not the neighbors, and especially not the police. Because if they found out, they might blame her. His words wrapped around her like chains, making her feel smaller than ever. She nodded slowly, her throat tight, her secret now sealed not just by fear, but by her brother's warning. She returned to her room and lay awake in the dark, listening to the creaks of the house, the distant barking of dogs, and the faint hum of the street lamp outside, each sound louder than the last, as though the whole world was waiting for something to happen. Her eyes stared into the shadows, her heart heavy with guilt and confusion. And though she tried to convince herself it was just a simple sandwich, deep down she knew this story was far from simple, and the knocks on the door were only the beginning. The next day came with gray skies, as though the weather itself had caught the unease that had settled in the little girl's neighborhood. She woke up tired, her eyes heavy from the restless night, but her heart beating fast the moment she remembered the secret she now carried. She walked down the stairs quietly, hoping no one would notice her trembling hands. Her father sat at the table with his arms crossed, staring out the window as if expecting another knock at any moment. Her mother moved about the kitchen in silence. Her brother avoided her eyes. The weight of their whispered conversation the night before still heavy between them, she sat in her chair, pushing her breakfast around her plate, her appetite gone. All she could think about was the man, the sandwich, the way the police had shown his picture, and her brother's warning that she should stay silent. At school, she could hardly focus. The teacher's words drifted over her like a fog. Her friends laughed, played, shared secrets, but she felt too distant, too trapped in her own thoughts. She wanted to tell someone, anyone, but fear tied her tongue. She doodled on her notebook, drawing shaky shapes that looked like eyes watching her. She glanced out the window more than once, half expecting to see the man standing there again. But the schoolyard was empty, and that emptiness didn't comfort her. It only deepened the mystery of where he had gone. When the final bell rang, she dragged her feet on the way home, her chest heavy, her eyes scanning every corner of the street. The afternoon sun was still high when the little girl walked slowly along the quiet street, her school bag heavy on her shoulder and her shoes scuffing against the pavement. She was tired but happy to be going home, clutching the sandwich her mother had packed for her, saving it because she liked to eat it later in the evening, when she could sit near the window and watch the world outside. But as she passed a corner, she noticed a man sitting on the cold sidewalk. His clothes dirty and torn, his hair messy, his face pale with hunger, his eyes downcast as though the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. She stopped for a moment, unsure of what to do. Her heart began to beat faster. She had seen people like him before, but never this close. And never looking so hopeless, the girl looked left and right, noticing how other people walking by ignored him. Some even glanced at him with disgust, as if he did not belong there. She tightened her grip on her sandwich, her small fingers trembling as she thought about her own hunger. But then her heart whispered something different, something softer, telling her he needed it more than she did. She took a slow step forward and then another, until she stood just a few feet away from the stranger. The man did not lift his head. Perhaps he thought she too would pass by without a word. But instead she bent down carefully and stretched out her hand, the sandwich held tightly in her palm, her voice low as she whispered, "You can take this." The man lifted his eyes at last, and what she saw made her own chest tighten. His eyes were red and tired, but there was surprise in them too, as if he could not believe someone so small and innocent could show kindness. His cracked lips opened slightly, his hand shaking as he reached out. For a second he hesitated, as though he feared she might change her mind. But when his fingers touched the sandwich, his eyes filled with tears. He looked at her with a strange mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," he whispered in a broken voice, the words barely escaping his mouth. It sounded like a voice that had not spoken in days. Weak but heavy with feeling, she nodded quickly, not knowing what else to say, her heart racing faster, as though she had done something both right and dangerous at the same time. Behind her, she noticed neighbors standing on their porches, their faces unreadable. They watched silently, their eyes sharp, but no one said a word. The girl felt their stares but tried to ignore them. She turned back to the man, who clutched the sandwich like it was treasure, and she stepped away, her small feet carrying her faster down the road until she was safely out of sight. When she reached her house, she opened the door quietly, afraid her parents might ask about the missing sandwich. Her mother smiled and asked if school had gone well. The girl nodded, forcing a smile, and hurried to her room, placing her bag on the bed. She sat near the window as she always did, only this time there was no sandwich in her hand. Instead, her mind replayed the man's face, the tears in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he said thank you. She pressed her palms together, feeling both proud and uneasy. Proud because she had done what no one else dared to do. Uneasy because she knew the neighbors had seen her, and she had no idea what they thought. The street outside seemed quieter than usual, the shadows longer and in her chest. A small whisper of worry grew stronger. As night fell, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house surrounding her, her family asleep while her mind refused to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man sitting on the cold ground, holding her sandwich with trembling hands. She wondered if he had eaten it quickly or saved it like she once did. She wondered if he was still there, or if he had moved somewhere else. And most of all, she wondered if she would see him again. Her heart carried a strange mixture of fear and hope. Fear because she knew people would question her if they found out. Hope because something inside told her that small act of kindness might mean more than she could imagine. As the clock ticked on the wall, she pulled her blanket tighter, feeling the weight of a secret that was hers alone. Not knowing that tomorrow, her world would change in a way she could not yet understand, and the sound of heavy knocks on her door would echo louder than her heart had ever beaten before. But for now, she only closed her eyes, caught between pride and unease, waiting for whatever tomorrow would bring. The morning sun slipped through the curtains, but the little girl woke up earlier than usual. Her sleep had been restless, filled with half-dreams of the man sitting on the sidewalk. His tired face and trembling hands holding her sandwich, she rubbed her eyes and sat up, the memory still fresh as if it had happened just moments ago. She looked around her small room, her school bag in the corner, her books stacked neatly. Everything felt normal. Yet something inside her did not feel normal at all. There was a strange heaviness in her chest, a whisper of worry she could not shake away. When she went downstairs, her mother was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The smell of warm bread filled the air. Her father sat reading the newspaper, her brother munching on cereal. It should have been an ordinary morning, but the girl kept glancing at the window, afraid she might see the man again. Afraid and yet a little hopeful, too, as she walked to school. Her steps slowed when she reached the corner where she had seen him yesterday. She held her breath, expecting the spot to be empty. But there he was, sitting in the same place, his back resting against the wall, his head bowed. As if the night had been long and cruel, her heart began to race again. She almost wanted to run past, but her feet froze. She looked around and noticed neighbors watching from across the street. Their eyes sharp with curiosity, whispers floated in the air. People speaking softly as though afraid to be heard. She could not catch all the words. But she knew they were talking about him, and maybe about her too. The girl clutched her bag tightly and hurried forward, her small steps faster, trying to leave their eyes behind. But the image of him stayed with her. At school, she found herself distracted, the teacher's voice echoing without meaning, her pencil hovering above her notebook. She tried to focus, but every time she blinked, she saw the stranger's face, the way he had whispered thank you, the way his eyes had filled with tears. She wondered if he was still hungry, if he had a place to sleep, if anyone else had helped him. Her classmates laughed and played, but she felt like she carried a secret no one else could understand, a secret that was growing heavier with each passing hour. When school ended and she began her walk home, her heart pounded harder than before. She turned the corner slowly, and there he was again. Not sitting this time, but standing under the street lamp even though it was still daylight. He leaned on the pole as if his legs were too weak to carry him. His eyes scanned the houses, and when they met hers, she felt a chill run down her spine. His gaze was not angry, not frightening, but intense. Almost as if he wanted to say something, her breath caught in her throat. She clutched her bag and hurried past him, her small shoes tapping quickly against the pavement. She dared not look back, but she could feel his eyes on her until she turned onto her own street. Inside her home, she pressed herself against the door for a moment. Her chest rising and falling, she thought about telling her mother but stopped. She feared her mother might scold her for giving away food to a stranger. She feared her father might get angry and forbid her from ever speaking to people outside. So she said nothing. She simply went upstairs and looked out the window. And there he was, across the road, now sitting again under the street lamp, still watching the neighborhood, his figure hunched and silent. She pulled the curtain closed quickly, her small hands shaking. That night, as her family talked over dinner, she could hardly eat. She listened as her father mentioned hearing neighbors complain, saying the man had been hanging around too long, saying someone should call the police. Her mother nodded quietly but said nothing more. Her brother shrugged. Not interested, but the girl felt her stomach twist tighter. She wanted to shout that he was not dangerous, that he had been kind to her, that he had said thank you, but she bit her tongue. The secret burned inside her, making her feel both important and terrified. When bedtime came, she lay in the dark staring at the shadows on her ceiling, the wind rattling the window slightly. She turned on her side and peeked out through a small gap in the curtain. The street outside looked calm, the lamp glowing faintly. But the man was still there, sitting silently as though the night belonged to him. She pulled the blanket over her head, her heart beating too fast. She whispered to herself that tomorrow everything would be normal again. Tomorrow he would be gone, but deep down she knew it was only the beginning. Something was building in the silence of the street, something that made her both afraid and curious. She did not yet know that the quiet knock she feared would not be from him, but from the police, and it would come much sooner than she expected.